to A Drunk History of Middle-earth. It's me, your host Chris. I'm by myself this time. Now, Becca is 9 months pregnant. Our little one is due this month and she is very tired. And we spent a lot of the afternoon getting a lot of baby stuff down from our loft or attic if you're our transatlantic cousins, and a loft or attic if you're just trans. Happy Pride Month. Hello. It's just after Tolkien Tag I'm recording this, which is now an annual event for me, where I spent a few days in Hamburg with one of our friends. Then we travelled down to Geldern Point, or whatever it's called, near a place called Alpen, where we stayed. And we attended Tolkien Tag, where I was dressed as a hobbit this year, which was fantastic. My feet were hurting. I was barefoot all day, just like a true hobbit. We saw a Windrose on Friday night, which is dwarf metal. And then Saturday we walked around in very, very, very hot weather. Met up with some really lovely people, Michelle and Stefan, who are... I hope you don't mind me saying this, guys, but they stunned a group of us when they told us that they'd just become grandparents, and it did not compute with how young these guys look. I don't know what is in the water in Germany, that everyone's got this Benjamin Button thing going on. I think they age backwards. That was crazy. Then on Saturday at Tolkien Tag, which if you don't know is a festival in Germany every year, which celebrates all things Tolkien, and it is amazing. Me and Becca and some friends went last year, and it was just me and some friends this year because Becca was being too busy being too pregnant. But next year we hope to take our whole family, so me, Becca, and our 2 kids, which will be lovely. And our friend Alex, if she can ever drag herself over from Poland. What's really annoying is, as a friend group, we have a group chat, and we've discovered that Alex will travel for Dick, but will not travel to see her friends. So that's a bit suspicious. What else is going on? A lot. Yeah, a lot. But now you really need to concern yourselves with. Well, I'll tell you anyway. So the Think Tankards podcast, if you are aware of that, if you follow us on Instagram, you'll see that that's a podcast I'm involved with. I don't do stand-up comedy anymore. I kind of got where I wanted out with that, and I was like, I can't be fucked with this. I'm doing too many things. But they are doing very good. So I met these guys doing stand-up comedy. They are still going. Nathan and Ian, they're very good. Their burgeoning careers are going well. So we have a podcast over there where I get to flex some of the other stuff that I like nerd shit and cybersecurity, which is what I do for a living. So if you're interested in other topics, we've also started doing video episodes, which is really interesting. Now I've wondered about doing video episodes for this podcast, but definitely not for today, because if you haven't kind of guessed from the title, what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to go through an essay I wrote for the Tolkien Society. It was published in Amon Hen 2 Junes ago, so June 2024, at the encouragement of a very dear friend who has since passed away, Amanda, who used to be the editor for Amon Hen. And it was based on a conversation that her and I and her husband, Cal, who I met up with in Edinburgh a few months ago, which was amazing. But the essay, as you'll have guessed from the title, is all about the nature of evil in Middle-earth. And anybody who's known me for a few years in and around the Tolkien community knows that this is a topic that I go back to again and again and again. But I've never spoke about it at length on this podcast. And this seemed like the perfect kind of, I'm going to call it a mini episode, but as we've seen over the past 4 years of this podcast, I either lie to myself or I have no real conception of how long something will take me. Because I'll say, oh, this is going to be a short episode, and then all of a sudden, 2 hours into a recording, I'm like, maybe not. So what else is going on with the podcast? Right, you will have seen previously with the last episode was Tom Bombadil, where me and Becca discussed the jolly old fellow, bright blue his jacket is and his boots are yellow, that I'd moved to longer episodes, and that's what I'm still doing, but I don't think I was still not prepared for how long the Arnor episode is. Just to give you a glimpse, it is the 3rd of June now. Me and Rebecca have recorded an hour of this episode already, of the Arnor episode, when I'd reached an hour's worth of content, and we plan to do the second hour tomorrow. And I am nowhere near finished the research. I've only just stopped discussing some of the places, and at this rate it's going to be about 6 hours, right? So just to give you a highlight at the length that I'm going to, I discovered that Bree, the village of Bree, is one of the oldest human settlements in Middle-earth. It's been around since the first age, so it's around 6,000 years old, if not more. Crazy. So, that's kind of the length that I'm going to. I've not even got properly into the kings of Arnor, and then the kings of Arthedain, Rhudaur, and Cardolan. So that's why it's taken a long time. And I wanted to have something for yous in the meantime, right? A little bit of a tantalizer, keep yous sweet. But that does then bring me to the next part. This is an unusual episode from me. It is an essay. So some of it's not going to sound as natural because it's all 100% my words. Like, it's all me. And it's all my own research and it's all my own thoughts. But the way I wrote it was for the Tolkien Society. It was for Amon Hen. And it's like a properly cited paper and everything. So it to me, when I read anything back, it might sound a little bit wooden. But it might just be that you think, what the fuck's he on about? But what we're going to do, so this is the introduction, naturally. Then we're going to read through the essay together. Then if there's any point where I might need to, I think that I might be able to give you a good example of something, I'll do that as we go on. But then after that, I'll finish off with some thoughts. But this is an episode where I'd really like to encourage discussion on this, because this does attract a fair amount of opinions, which is it's always good. That it's nice that, provided it's not a wrong opinion and it's rooted within something Tolkien wrote, then I'm always happy to discuss it. Because remember, there might not always be one right answer, but there are always wrong answers. So mine might be one of these wrong answers. So, if I ever meet Tolkien in any afterlife and I'm like, I wrote an essay once, he'd be like, yeah, I heard that, it was shit. So, So we good? We all good on that? We all rolled our various cigarettes, joints, got our drinks, whatever you do when you're listening to this, sat in the cook chair, pretending you're my friend. You parasocial fucks. Yeah. Yeah, you didn't think I'd bring it up, did you? I did. So, shall we discuss the nature of evil in Middle-earth and a particular concept that I love, which is Kintsugi, the Japanese art of making something more beautiful because of its flaws. And it's very much in the same vein as like when you're in a long-term relationship and your partner's like, oh God, you love me even though X. And I'm like, well, I love you because of that. So, So this essay is entitled The Grand Plan for Arda Healed. Eru, Morgoth, and Kintsugi. By me, Chris, the author. And we start with a quote from the Silmarillion. And thou, Morgoth, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful, which he himself hath not imagined. And thou, Morgoth, wilt also discover all the secret thoughts of thy mind, and wilt perceive that they are but part of the whole and tributary to its glory. That's a quote from Eru Ilúvatar. These are both the catalyst and focal point of this discussion. The simple question posed here is, was Morgoth Bauglir an agent of Eru and destined to spread evil in Arda under the direction or enablement of Eru? To answer this question, we'll look at several elements within the work of J.R.R. Tolkien in an attempt to obtain a clearer picture of how much, if any, agency the children of Ilúvatar, including the Ainur, have within the drama of Arda, as Eru works towards his ultimate goal of Arda healed. That could only be appreciated if it followed Arda marred. So, I'll break from the essay there and I'll just very quickly explain it if you're not aware of these concepts. The children of Ilúvatar means everything, everyone in creation within Middle Earth, right, within the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. So the children of Iluvatar are the three main races: humans, of which hobbits are a part, elves, and dwarves. But other children of Iluvatar, including this, are the Ainur, which is the Valar and the Maiar. Gandalf is the Maiar, remember, as a wizard. Sauron is a Maiar. Morgoth was one of the Valar, the greater spirits. Little g gods is Valar. And capital A angels, Maiar, essentially. I'm just for the people who need to kind of lock in just for this episode. Then I use the phrase the drama of Arda. That is the elves and the very philosophical way within some of Tolkien's writings as describing the entire history of the universe within Lord of the Rings. It's called the drama of Arda. Now, Arda is the planet Earth, so and Ea is the universe. So the drama of Arda is the entire history from the beginning of the universe to the end as it takes place within the planet on which Middle Earth is placed, the Earth, i.e. And then we get to Arda Healed, which is the term for when the universe ends and Eru, i.e. big G God, capital G God, remakes the entire universe perfect. It becomes heaven. And what the Lord of the Rings is in and what the stories are in is called Arda Mard. And it's marred because Morgoth, Sauron's boss, put all of his sin and corruption into the very particles of the world. It's called the Taint of Morgoth. And I can hear Becca laughing from 2 rooms away because she knows I've just said that. The Taint of Morgoth. And the idea is that when Eru remakes the world, remakes the universe into the perfect version of itself, that the taint will be removed, and that's called Arda Healed. And what Lord of the Rings and all this evil stuff happens is called Arda Mard. So, to summarise that last paragraph, just to keep everybody with us, I'm asking in this essay, did anybody, apart from Eru Iluvatar, actually have free will within any of these stories, or does it all serve a purpose? Back to the reading. As part of this analysis, I'd also like to consider how Morgoth's actions may then actually be fulfilling Eru's plan, as opposed to subverting it. I'll also go over the idea that the children of Iluvatar require strife and sorrow in order to fully appreciate Arda Healed when the time comes. As a prerequisite, we must examine Morgoth as an agent of Eru in Arda through the lens of a thought experiment on the problem of evil. So, we're all familiar with what I'm proposing. Now, I'm going to define why the evil as a problem needs to be discussed. So now I'm going to talk about something called the Epicurean paradox, which is not to do with food, unfortunately. This is also known as Epicurus's trilemma, or the riddle of Epicurus, which pertains to this idea. In summary, this thought experiment, the premise, is that God cannot simultaneously be omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent. For God to be all three of these things, evil could not exist. Yet it does. So omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, benevolent, all good. If God was all 3 of these things, evil would not exist. But evil does exist. So, let's look at it in relation to Eru, the god of the universe within Tolkien's works, which is, again, for everybody who doesn't know this, I'm not being patronising, I just want to make sure that you don't go away from this episode more confused than when you came in. Eru within Tolkien's works is a fictional name for the real Christian God, right? So the God that we have in Christianity, Eru is Tolkien's fictional name for that to him very real God, okay? So let's talk about the problem of evil in relation to Eru Iluvatar, the god of Middle-earth. Number 1, omnipotence. If Eru does not have the power to prevent Morgoth, but wants to and knows everything that Morgoth is doing, then he can't be omnipotent. Okay? So If he can't stop Morgoth, but he knows what he's up to and he wants to stop him because he's evil, then that means Eru is not all-powerful. He's not omnipotent. Number 2, omniscience. If Eru has the desire to stop Morgoth and the power to prevent him, but he does not have the knowledge of what Morgoth is doing, then he cannot be omniscient or omniscient, depending on your pronunciation. So if God has the power to stop him and he wants to stop him, but he doesn't know where he is or what he's doing, then he's not all-knowing. Number 3, omnibenevolence. All good. Finally, if Eru allows Morgoth to exist and commit evil of his own will, and has both the knowledge of this and the power to stop him, but he doesn't, then Eru cannot be benevolent. If he can stop him, and he knows what he's up to and where he is, but he doesn't, then he's not an all-good god. So we all familiar? We're all on an even keel about this trilemma. This, two out. It's a triangle, right? If all 3 of these things were true, then evil didn't exist. But it means that maybe only 2 out of 3 can be, because evil still exists. So, the omnipotence of Eru is demonstrated readily, as seen in his creation of the universe with the utterance of a single phrase, and then again with the fall of Numenor. So, the single phrase is when Eru creates the universe, right? It's right at the beginning of the Silmarillion. So we demonstrate that he's all-powerful because he created the universe with a single phrase. Ea, I think he just says Ea, and that's it, the universe. Then again, he shows his power with the fall of Numenor, when he swallows the entire island, changes the shape of the world forever. You can no longer travel to the Undying Lands unless you're an elf or have been given a special permission. So similarly, the omniscience, the all-knowingness of Eru is demonstrated in his understanding of events within Ea in the universe. And this is shown through the converse of Eru and Manwë, which is taken from the book The Nature of Middle-earth. In brief, this conversation covers the separation of what the Valar are capable of, i.e. their power, and what they are able to do, i.e. their authority. This is a long conversation that the leader of the Valar, Manwë, he has with Eru. He's the only one who can talk directly with God, right? And in this, Manwë and Eru discuss, Eru says, you could have done this, and Manwë says, well, I didn't know if I was supposed to be able to do that. And Eru then kind of tells him off gently by saying, well, you encourage the elves to move to the Undying Lands, to Aman, and remove them from Middle-earth, so you weren't that concerned about your authority before then. But what this really does is just demonstrates that even though Eru still is outside of the universe, he has almost perfect knowledge of what is going on. So he does demonstrate omniscience. So we've seen that Eru is all-powerful, and we've seen that he is all-knowing, so that leaves us with 2 conclusions. 1, Eru is not omnibenevolent and is instead passively malevolent towards his creations, i.e. he's evil by choosing to not act. Or number 2, Eru is omnibenevolent, but must allow suffering and hardship to occur, and this is to ensure Arda healed is fully earned and appreciated by his children, and he is guiding them towards an ultimate goal. So, given that Tolkien was a staunch Catholic, I dismiss I kind of dismiss the premise of point 1 outright. The Bible, the Christian Bible, explicitly states that God is love, right? And as such, it would be difficult to see a profoundly religious man, such as Tolkien, writing a malevolent representation of the Christian God. So that, for me, that conclusion doesn't go anywhere. So instead, let's explore the premise of point 2. Eru allowed and foresaw the actions of Morgoth, including the marring of Arda, as a necessary evil in order to bring about the culmination of his true vision, Arda healed. This premise also extends to others who brought about or were instruments of evil in Arda, such as and I'm going to catch some heat for this, Turin Tarambar, who was cursed by Morgoth and led a tragic life, and as well Feanor. A key piece of evidence for this point comes from Saruman would also be the one as well. A key piece of evidence for this point comes from the nature of Middle-earth, in which fate and free will are discussed. Tolkien wrote in regards to the Ainur being actors in the drama of Arda, and Eru having foreknowledge as a process of two parts during the Ainulindale. The Ainulindale is the music that created the universe, and the Ainur, the spirits, they sung with Eru at the beginning. He taught them how to sing, and of that they created the universe. But during this, they saw everything that was going to happen, but Eru hid the ending from them. So let's discuss the Eru having foreknowledge as a process and it being two parts during this creation. So, first stage, this is a quote. First stage, the music or concert of voices and instruments. Eru takes up alterations by their created wills, good or bad, and adds his own. Second stage, the theme is transformed into a tale and presented as visible drama to the Ainur, which is bound but great. So it's big, but it has limits. Eru had not complete foreknowledge, but after it, his foreknowledge was complete to the smallest detail. But he did not reveal it all. He veiled the latter part from the eyes of the Valar, who were to be actors. So that emphasis I've put there at the last the last couple of sentences, that's me, right? That's mine. But to me, that perfectly demonstrates how Eru is omnibenevolent. He's all good, but he must allow suffering and hardship to take place for the greater good. And it just loops back to that old saying that so many of us will have heard: God works in mysterious ways, right? That's to me, that's where it's got to be. So let's now discuss Kintsugi. So Kintsugi, which translates from Japanese to golden joinery, is the centuries-old art of fixing broken pottery using tree sap coloured with materials such as gold, silver, or platinum. The end result is a unique artifact that celebrates the unique history by emphasizing its fractures and breaks instead of hiding or disguising them. In fact, Kintsugi often makes the repaired piece even more beautiful than the original, revitalizing it with a new look and giving it a second life, which I think is beautiful. That you wear your experiences and you're all the more beautiful for it, because it makes you such a whole and a much more whole and complex person when you apply it to people. So now let's apply it to Eru Ilúvatar, the god of Middle-earth. Eru's actions, or inactions, within the drama of Arda are demonstrations of Kintsugi, according to me. It's my essay. In essence, the children of Ilúvatar, including the Ainur, would not fully appreciate his ultimate vision of a perfect world without first experiencing the strife and sorrow of an imperfect world. And the perfect agent to introduce this strife would be Morgoth. So, yes, you're probably thinking it. So let me just kind of spell it out for you, right? This is my thought, it's your thought. We're all thinking this, and you're right. Ain't no sunshine without rain. That's it. That's the whole point of this essay. So if you want to switch off now, go for it. But I would like to consider, back to the writing, I would like to consider a poignant example of what paradise looked like for humans when perhaps they hadn't, quote-unquote, earned it. That is, a paradise given as a gift to humans, but they didn't strive for it and they didn't build it themselves. Though they suffered and toiled much during the events of the first age, it may still have been too soon in the timeline of creation. So let's discuss Numenor and talk about that now. At the end of the War of Wrath, the Edain, the early humans, the good humans, were rewarded with the island of Numenor and a long life. This worked well for a long time by human reckoning and was intended as a quote-unquote second Eden of sorts. The first being the land of Hildorian, where humans first awoke in Middle-earth and were subsequently corrupted by Morgoth. And the history of Middle-earth shows that perhaps due to inherent corruption, or Morgoth's taint upon the world, or a mixture of both of these things, that neither of these paradises would last. The culmination of the first fall of humans was Eru stopped speaking with humans directly, their lives shortened, and the quote-unquote the world turned against them, right? So this is from some really obscure Tolkien writings which tells about the origins of humans, where God, when humans first woke up, God did talk to them in Middle-earth, but then he was like, you need to figure things out for yourself, you'll be much better in the long run. And Morgoth came along and corrupted humans by saying, I'll give you everything you need. But because he didn't teach them anything, humans suffered for it in the long term because they became dependent on him, which is what Eru was wanting to avoid. And then Eru stopped speaking with humans directly when they turned to worship Morgoth, which was our first fall within Tolkien's works. The second fall was the downfall of Numenor. So, the world turning against them means that the humans start to get sick and like animal attacks and stuff like that. It was like the natural world turned against them. And the second fall, back to the writing, the second fall in Numenor ended with the destruction of the island and the changing of the world forever. There is some precedence in Tolkien's writings about gifts given by the powerful causing more harm than good. An immediate solution or reward without the humans involved working for it often works to their detriment. Surprisingly, I'm not going to choose the obvious one, which was the 9 rings of power given to humans by Sauron. Instead, I'm going to look at a much older example. During the tale of Adenel, which is what I talked about, the first fall of humanity, Morgoth appears to humans and claims to be able to give them the knowledge that Eru tells them to seek for themselves. But Eru states that it would have been more beneficial for them in the long term if they figured it out. But after the first humans accept Morgoth, instead of teaching, he gives humans gifts that answer their immediate worries, such as food and clothes. However, once these gifts are taken away, they struggle all the more and they did not learn anything for themselves. And I like to think that this might have been Tolkien's way of weaving in the saying, give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you'll feed him for a lifetime. So going back to Kintsugi and Numenor, I put forward, I reckon, that Numenor was too early in the plans of Eru to be fully appreciated by humans. That they had suffered greatly through the War of Wrath and their prior brief history. However, we need to remember that Eru, as a creator, operates on a cosmological scale and would be concerned with all of his children within creation, not just the 3 houses of the Edain that were given safe haven on an island raised by the Valar. So what I'm saying is that even though the Silmarillion focuses on the Edain, they are a tiny fraction of the whole of humanity, which is only 1/3 of Eru's children on the planet of Arda. So Numenor is a disproportionately big part of history. But if we look at it from the point of view of a god, like a cosmological creator, it's a tiny fraction. And Eru didn't give them this island. The Valar did. The Valar raised this island out of the sea. So if we take that you need to work for things, it might have been too much too soon, and it spoiled us. Essentially, it spoiled humanity. So given that the Númenóreans eventually rebelled against the Valar, it seems they were simply just not ready to appreciate the paradise the Valar had prepared for them. If they were, perhaps Eru would not have destroyed the island during the Akalabeth, which is the downfall of Numenor. Arguably, he would not have needed to destroy the island at all. So this next section, surprisingly, I think it's a good segue if I do say so myself, is the Valar are not infallible. And I've put a question here. This is my first question in this section. Did the Valar, did they make a mistake in raising Numenor in the first place? In the converse of Manwë and Eru, the conversation within the book The Nature of Middle-earth, Eru gently chastises Manwë for removing elves from Middle-earth, as they were intended to guide and teach their younger brethren, the humans. So remember, when elves first woke up, the Valar were scared of what Morgoth would do to them, and in some stories, the first orcs were corrupted elves. So, the Valar do everything in their power to get the elves to go across the world and across the sea so they can go and live in Aman, in Valinor, in the Undying Lands forever. And a lot of elves do. And Eru wasn't particularly happy with the Valar for this because elves were meant to be humans, big brothers and sisters, essentially. That was what they were for. They were meant to guide and teach humans. And all the elves that were left in Middle-earth were like cavemen compared to the elves that left. Just like humans were like cavemen compared to the elves that stayed. Like, so it's like two orders of progress above humans that they missed out on. So this particular act, by the way, the act of removing the elves to the protection of the Undying Lands, caused mixed views amongst the Valar. As one note on this conversation details, quote, "Nonetheless, the removal of the Eldar from Middle-earth went to the limits of their authority, as they well understood, and not all of the Valar had believed this to be wise." And to quote the great philosopher Jeff Goldblum, "You wondered so much if you could, you didn't stop to think whether you should." So the salient point here is that the Valar are not infallible, and Morgoth is the prime example of that. And they have made mistakes previously. They might be the little g gods of the world, but they are not infallible. They make mistakes. Therefore, would it be a stretch to wonder if they made a mistake removing the Edain from Middle-earth as well? Was it a mistake to create Numenor? In the end, Eru drowned the island, leaving the few survivors to make their way to Middle-earth and establish themselves there. Hold on for the Arnor episodes coming in future. It's hard not to see this as a corrective action, right? Perhaps not the destruction of Numenor as the way I look at it, the destruction of Numenor wasn't particularly a final act, but it was more a chain of events that led to that being required. And ultimately, it served Eru's plan to have the Edain return to Middle-earth along with the remnant of the Eldar. So evidence so far from the events of the Alcalabeth and the converse of Manwë and Eru seems to point that Eru wanted all of his children, dwarves, humans, elves, to be present on the main continent of Middle-earth, where they can learn from and protect each other. And ultimately, they would earn the rewards of Arda Healed, of a perfect paradise. Eventually, they would earn it all together. And another section now, the new section is called the Atani, Eru's Wildcards. The Atani is another word for humans. It's the name for the race of humans as a collective. The Eldar is elves, the Atani is humans. The Silmarillion describes Eru as giving gifts to humans. And the quote is, "But to the Atani I will give a new gift. Therefore he willed that the hearts of men should seek beyond the world and should find no rest therein, but they should have a virtue to shape their life amid the powers and chances of the world, beyond the music of the Ainur, which is as fate to all things else, and of their operation everything should be, in form and deed, completed, and the world fulfilled unto the last and smallest." What that essentially seems to be suggesting, and I'm open to your interpretations, but that is that humans, one of the gifts that we got as humans is free will, and the other one is death. Death is the gift in that, unlike the elves who stay with the world until the end of time, and they have the sorrow and the weariness resting on them, humans get to leave the world and go outside of the universe and join Eru in the Timeless Halls. So then the free will about saying they can act outside of the music of the Ainur, and it might seem as if humans are the one exemption to Eru's designs, but that idea is then quickly kind of nixed in the next section. But Ilúvatar, this is a quote again, "But Ilúvatar knew that men, being set amid the turmoils of the powers of the world, would stray often and would not use their gifts in harmony. And he said, These two in their time shall find that all they do redounds at the end only to the glory of my work. So I would then ask this of you, the listener. If Eru can foresee and plan ahead for every decision made by the free will of every human that has ever existed or will ever exist, and it still ends up serving his ultimate plan, is that not simply the illusion of choice? However, even if free will is an illusion and doesn't really exist within our world or Tolkien's, it does not necessarily mean that Eru was anything other than omnibenevolent if free will didn't exist, right? Humans may very well have what they consider freedom to act beyond the music of the Ainur, but if Eru ensured that every human who ever would live would end up serving his grand plan for Ardahield in one way or the other, good or bad, then they didn't have true free will. But that doesn't necessarily mean Eru was evil. But both things can be true at once. Like, you might not have free will, and he might still be a benevolent god. But, you know, how do you feel about that? How would you feel if knowing that no matter what you did, that the X purpose would be achieved throughout your lifetime, that your life would culminate in that, regardless of what you did or how you got there? Is the destination more important than the journey to you? Are you a fan of freerun? I am. I am very much a journey guy. So I'm not really particularly bothered on that scale, but I do find it very interesting when people talk about free will. And this is the crux of it. Does free will exist? That's the whole thing that got the start of this essay going. So next, let's move on and look at Morgoth now. The section, Morgoth's actions. Taking a look at some of Morgoth's actions, it could be argued that they all serve the quote-unquote greater good, or at least serve to produce an Arda Mard, as in the tainted world, after which every child of Ilúvatar would appreciate Ardahield. So in the Ainu Lindale, the music of creation, Morgoth interweaves his own discordant themes into the music until Eru begins a new theme twice more before stopping and uttering the famous saying that I put at the beginning of this essay about everything has its uttermost source in me. One might wonder, when you first read that in the Silmarillion or listen to it in the audiobook or whatever, why Eru didn't stop Morgoth immediately, as he clearly has the power to do so, given that Morgoth's theme is stopped with a single note from Eru. And that in there, we see a demonstration of Eru's omnipotence and omniscience. When Ea is created and Arda is formed, Morgoth has the power to fight and strive with the other Ainur, and from it, he creates things that ultimately further Eru's plans. So we'll see more this omnipotence, this all-powerful and all-knowing. Eru knows what Morgoth's up to and plans for it, and it ends up bettering the world in some ways. So, the best example is ultimate Tolkien lore drop. We know how rain, mist, and clouds were created. It's because Morgoth kept boiling the oceans when Ulmo, the Valar of the deeps, was doing it. So Eru comforts Ulmo during this interaction, who is encouraged and heartened by what Eru initially calls his war upon thy province. And already, so we see here that Morgoth boiling the water creates clouds, creates mist, creates rain. 3 vital components for life in Arda are created as a result of Morgoth's discord. One action of Morgoth's that is said to be his worst, that Eru considers his worst, is the corruption of elves into orcs. And if you follow that theory in the published Silmarillion, that orcs originated from some corrupted elves, maybe humans got mixed in later down the line, blah, blah, blah. But on the surface, this creation of the orcs seems to serve no purpose whatsoever. So I would consider this perhaps the strongest counter-argument for my point about Kintsugi, that it's all, ultimately it's more beautiful because of its flaws. Orcs would be the biggest counterpoint to that. And it said that Morgoth corrupting captured elves into orcs may be, quote, the vilest deed of Morgoth and the most hateful to Iluvatar. So the implication is that Eru did not desire this, but given that we've established his omniscience and his omnipotence, he's all-knowing and all-powerful, why doesn't he interfere? And perhaps the answer, again, lies in the quote that begins this article, that all things, including Morgoth, who seek to subvert his will, prove to be Eru's instrument in devising things more wonderful than they ever imagined. So furthermore, it actually is another example of Kintsugi in that it leads to something truly beautiful, which is demonstrated during the events of The Lord of the Rings. Now, the presence of orcs in all ages of Middle-earth proved to be a compelling reason for peace and alliances to be made. One, as in me, could even go so far as to ponder whether Eru may have deliberately provided a common enemy to all of his children, including the adopted dwarves. Remember, dwarves were created by Aule, and Eru adopted them as his own, but he made them go back to sleep until the elves awoke. I've got an episode on dwarves if you want to know more. But the adopted dwarves, whose stubborn nature may otherwise bring them into conflict with other races, they hate the orcs more than any other race, and the greatest friendships of the Second Age began with the dwarves and humans banding together in the north of Middle-earth for a common cause against orc attacks. Now, this led to a prosperous relationship and alliances which lasted well into the Fourth Age of Middle-earth and proved a key factor in the defense of Erebor during the War of the Ring. Now, I would make the argument here that had the dwarves and the men of the North not been such stalwart allies, starting with these historic orc attacks, then during the War of the Ring, King Brand of Dale and Dane II Ironfoot of Erebor would not have been able to provide such a united front. This ultimately led to victory in the north and prevented the Easterling armies who were attacking from the north, prevented them from joining attacks on Mirkwood and Lothlorien, which, if successful, that would have meant that a large force of Easterlings and orcs would have come down from the north, possibly caught Aragorn, caught them at the Fields of Pelennor, caught them at Minas Tirith, caught them on the Morannon, even caught them maybe at Helm's Deep, whatever, caught them somewhere. It could have tipped the scales during the War of the Ring. So that's like one example. So from something so vile that Eru hated above all else, the worst thing that Morgoth ever did, creating the orcs, from that, it might have been the glue that united the children of Iluvatar throughout the ages. So, the question then becomes, in Eru's grand cosmic plan and his ultimate vision of Arda of the world, would sacrificing a few for the benefit of the many be an unreasonable decision for a god to make? If Morgoth was allowed to carry out his plan and corrupt elves and humans into orcs, would an omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent god simply view it as a required sacrifice to reach his end goal of true harmony and paradise? And for some more information on this while you make up your mind, it seems to me that Eru would find this decision easier than we think, as we consider that if orcs are corrupted elves and later corrupted humans, then invariably they would end up in the halls of Mandos, where they would begin the healing process. Or for humans, they would leave the world and the universe entirely and be with Eru, where they could similarly be healed. So even the orcs, their existence, could that, on a cosmological scale, remember you're thinking like the scale of a god, could that simply be a temporary evil on a cosmological scale that serves more good than evil? That the creation of orcs, that it's such an abhorrent, disgusting thing, Even for the orcs involved, they could be healed and their spirits returned and their souls soothed and healed into back to what they once were or would have been. And in return, they contributed to making the universe the perfect version of itself. Would you then start to look at the orcs as not just a necessary evil, but even, I don't know, would you go so far as to maybe praise them for their service? I don't know, man. My conclusion here is a simple one, right? Morgoth acted as an agent of Eru, injecting discord into the Ainu Lindale and future events as a way to realise Eru's ultimate vision of paradise. Arda Healed would be produced as part of the second music, which would see the children of Iluvatar contribute to the creation of such, but with a key difference, right? That all who join in the music to realise Eru's vision fully understand and appreciate what is being created for them. The only way for the children of Iluvatar, collectively, to fully appreciate the paradise of Arda Healed, a perfect world, is to have struggled and strove and lived through Arda Mad. To experience paradise, you must have seen hell. And it's not hard to see the parallels here between these events and the story of Job, let's call him Job, from the Bible. In this, Lucifer is permitted to inflict a victim with all manner of suffering, but only to the point that God allows it. Now, with Tolkien's work being fundamentally religious and fundamentally Catholic, that strand of thought and good and evil is a demonstration of these limits. To me, it's quite clear, right? That then we go a little bit further, and this is where I'm going to finish this off here. Morgoth is the ultimate evil in Middle-earth. He corrupts the very fabric of creation with his discord. He then creates orcs. He tries to fight the world. He results in the world being shaped and reshaped many times. But ultimately, it all serves Eru's grand plan. So I will finish off with this thought. Maybe Morgoth was aware of this. He was the greatest of the Valar. He was the greatest of all of Eru's children. Is it so far-fetched to think that possibly Morgoth was aware of what he needed to do? He might have been the only one out of everybody except Eru who knew this, and he took the biggest sacrifice. He played his part willingly, and he was a noble sacrificial lamb, and he bore the cross on his shoulders as an origin of evil. And he was maybe he did this because he was the only one who understood his father's plans better than any of the Ainur ever could hope to. So from that perspective, it might have become as a blessed relief to Morgoth when he was thrust through the doors of night at the end of the First Age, knowing that he'd played his part in the drama of Arda to perfection. And that is my essay on Kintsugi and the nature of evil in Middle-earth. That it is for the greater good, the greater good. What do you think? That's something I'd be very interested to know. What do you think about evil in Middle-earth? Now, I feel like a bit of a twat sometimes because this is one of those arguments where it's like, oh, it's the greater good, God works in mysterious ways. That these arguments have been put forward for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it's very easy for me, for whatever you say, to disagree with me, where I could just say, oh yeah, but ultimately it leads to good, So is there any examples in Tolkien's work of evil that does not lead to some more eventual good? Because we can't forget that Tolkien had the concept of eucatastrophe, which was victory from the jaws of defeat, where it was some kind of the conquering of good over evil right at the end where it needed to be. Then you have all these tragic stories and these tragic characters like Turin Turambar, who fucked up everything he touched, and it might have been a curse of Morgoth. It might have just been him being an absolute dick. You've got Húrin himself, Turin's dad, who has to sit in a throne for 30 years, and then he inadvertently, he almost leads Morgoth to Gondolin when he's freed, and he has a very bad end as well. Who knows? You know, was Morgoth playing a part? Was he just playing a really good part? I'd be interested to know what you think. I do particularly like the idea that and you got to look at it from a cosmological scale, that the orcs might actually be just the glue that everybody needed to band them together, because otherwise the dwarves might have fucked everything up for everyone. It could have been anybody. It could have been a human. It could have been Turin. Could have been Feanor. Could have been any dwarf. Right? Anybody in each race had the potential to fuck things up with everybody else, like the Kinslayings with the elves, Thingol, and the dwarves with the Nauglamir. You know, every race had the potential to really mess things up, and there was these blips, but there always seems to then be some kind of cataclysmic battle or whatever that then forges alliances and forces people to band together. Like in the First Age, dwarves rescue some humans, I think, with Azagal. Glaurung first appears. Like there's some one of the wars of Beleriand, like dwarves appear and just kind of save arse. And likewise, humans save elves, and that's how the Ring of Barahir gets going. And then elves save humans, elves save dwarves, and we see it repeated throughout, you know. So these common enemies give hope, and then you've got Legolas and Gimli, Legolas and Gemlas. That's probably their fucking Yowie name, isn't it? You've got Legolas and Gimli who bond over killing orcs. They compete over it. It's a glue in their friendship, is counting how many of these orcs they've killed, or Uruk-hai or whatever. So who knows? But I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's me solo dolo, like Dochi, and I will endeavour to carry on my research with Arnor for the mega episodes. Then I'm not even thinking about what's after that because there's just too much. I'm also involved in other writing projects as well, which is very refreshing. So yes, the next time you hear from me, most likely we will have had a child, but depending on how I record the Arnor episode, you might not even hear about it at all until the episode after that. We'll see. But I hope that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you are having a wonderful time, that this has been thought-provoking, this has been entertaining, and I hope that I hear from you about it. But other than that, remember, everyone can tell when you've had a wank. We can see it in your eyes. And we all think you're disgusting. So that's a goodbye from me, Chris, and I'll speak to you next time.